The Glass Ball by Bernard Capes. Read by Bethina. It happened in the winter of 1881, said my friend. You remember that winter? It began to freeze hard early in November, and the frost never fairly broke until the second or third week in March. I had come up to town by the South Western Railway, travelling through a white and windless country, and the cold was stupefying. I lay most of the way in a sort of torpor, gelid from toe to brain, and only just sensible of the still and silent flow of things outside the window. A desolate day, with hardly a human shape aboard to emphasise its loneliness. I don't know if I slept at all. I was alone in my compartment, and in a sort of mental stupor, as I say. And then suddenly I was awake and staring. It was snowing outside, and something had spoken to me, or tried to speak. There was an impression in my brain as of a little black leaning figure, infinitely small, as if infinitely distant. A mere oblique accent on the sheeted immensity of things, of a staggered white face, of a loud subconscious voice. And here, without and within, were only void and running silence. I shook as one shakes, escaping by a hair's breadth the insidious clutch of a nightmare. It had been a nightmare, I supposed, of the kind that discovers a minute rent in the veil over the unseen, synchronously with some malefic horror on the further side. And as always the rent had been closed, only just timely for me. Such dreams are momentarily demoralising. Oddly enough, the fear of this one dwelt with me for days. I could not shake off its memory, in the tremor of which was mingled, nevertheless, a strange emotion like pity. Imagine some lone survivor in the Arctic wastes, uttering instinctively, as he sinks to his death, that call for human aid which none, even the most daring, may forego at the last. For some nameless reason that image, or its like, hung constantly in my mind until presently it wrought in me an only half-reluctant desire to have my dream again. What, I thought, if that dreadful approaching face, seen through the rent, had been addressed to me, not in malignity, but in an agony of supplication? That was a morbid fancy resolutely to be dismissed. A few strenuous days in London promised to see the last of it. Christmas was near, and with it an engagement to a family of young relatives who would certainly expect seasonable presents. I prepared for the sacrifice. It was then that the name of John Trent swam suddenly into my field of mental vision, and with a click stood focused there. Who was John Trent? I knew no more than that he was a lost gentleman whose whereabouts his family, or lawyers, or natural representatives, were daily seeking through advertisement in the papers and police stations. It was only one case like 50 others, and there was no known reason why it should suddenly absorb my attention. Yet quite unaccountably it did. Each morning I turned for first news to that reiterated paragraph in the agony column, offering money for whatever information as to the movements of the vanished John Trent. He had last been seen, it appeared, on the afternoon of my journey to London. Perhaps it was that slight coincidence which attracted me, when he had left his lodgings at Winchfield for a walk, and thereafter he had been seen no more. Some later particulars gave his age as 40, his disposition as solitary, his temper as peculiar and inclined to rashness. He had been something wont in the past to self-obliterations, it seemed, yet hardly after this senseless fashion. And there the tale of him ended. One afternoon I walked down to the Lowther Arcade, then drearily existent, to effect my purchases. It was all a long medley of toys and fancy stuff from which to select, but I chose, with an eye to neatness and economy, even down to the baby on whose behalf I had the inspiration to buy a glass snowing ball. You know the sort? I hadn't seen one since I was a child myself, and I was delighted. There is a man inside with a little wintry landscape and a Swiss chalet, and when you turn the ball upside down and round again, thick snow is falling. That is the rule, but I observed at once that the specimen I received from the superior young lady was an exception to the rule. It had inside it only the solitary figure of a man, and the man was skating. Yes, he skated, actually, moving in little swoops and circles over a sheet of ice which seemed to dissect the ball, and as he skated, snow fell. I stood staring stupidly, and as I stared, the man went through the ice and disappeared. "That's different from the others," I said loudly to the girl. I suppose my tone startled her. I'm sure it startled me. "Is it?" she said. "I don't think so." And no more it was. When I looked again at the thing in my hand, there were the peasant and the chalet and the little landscape, all correct, and all motionless in their places. I didn't buy the ball, but something else. And from the arcade I went straight to the nearest police station where, among the posted bills, figured that relating to the disappearance of John Trent. "I think," I said to the inspector, "I can tell you where he is. He is under the ice in Fleet Pond." And so he was. And thence they dragged him when the bitter frost came to an end. The little oblique accent on the whirling white sheet, half seen, half dreamt by me, the mortal expression, the loud cry, they had all represented the fate of John Trent, skating like a madman, solitary and unsuspected, on that vast plain of ice beside the track. He had gone insanely to his doom on that stark, inhuman day, without a word to and unseen by a solitary soul, save myself, and by me only in that exchange of subconscious recognition which obliterates intervening space. To mine alone, in all that running, close-shut train, had he been able to appeal. Yet, with what purpose from such a man? I think I know. He had a young child, one, legitimately and wholly dependent upon him. Until they could produce certain evidence that he, John Trent, was dead and not merely disappeared, that child would be a beggar. And that was why he had wanted his fate to be definitely known, why, to my still deficient understanding, he had turned its little inmates out of their glass snowing house and had taken their place. That was The Glass Ball by Bernard Capes. This is one of several stories by Bernard Capes, a somewhat neglected author who I think was rather good, that you can find on my YouTube channel. Look for the playlists section and look for audiobooks, and there you'll find several more spooky stories by Bernard Capes. If you enjoyed this one, please remember to click the like button and consider subscribing to the channel or indeed joining the channel to support my work. And as always, thank you for listening.